Hi and welcome to Jamie deRoy and Friends. This week is a very special show. From the archives of the Primary Stages Off-Broadway Oral History Project, we have a series of interviews. I enjoyed them so much, I wanted to share them with you. So have a look.
Playwrights Horizons was a program of the Clark Center of the YWCA.
On 8th Avenue. Okay.
Right, and it was Bob's deal, and Bob had come from APA and the actors, you know, and Richard Barr and all like that, and so he started this theater.
And you're upstairs.
We're upstairs
at the Y.
At the Y in a, I guess it was, yeah, it was quite a flexible space. It was kind of a, it was a little shaped a little bit the way the CSC space is shaped. There were people all around. Bob had an audience. He had audience members who loved it. Bob he just chose the plays that he liked, and he sometimes chose the plays because he liked the writers. His audience would sit through anything.
There are playwrights, American playwrights, springing up everywhere. And Edward Albee and his two producers, Dick Barr and Clinton Wilder, started this group called the Playwrights Unit, and they started giving young playwrights a theater and a small budget to do their plays. It was like 1 week of rehearsal, very brief, and then like 4 performances, 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday, usually at the Cherry Lane. They also rented the Van Damme Theater sometimes, which is where Boys in the Band was first seen. So I think, to me, they were doing it about the same time as Cafe Chino and Ellen Stewart La Mama. It all seemed to happen within 2 or 3 year period. But suddenly American playwrights were sexy. I remember Sam Shepard was on the cover of Time and Newsweek, both within a month of each other. And I just can't imagine that happening today, really.
You know, a career in the arts, I think, is a continual journey of self-definition. And, you know, who am I? And in some cases, how do I sell that? You know, and so that really was a real strong encouragement to me that yes, there is a place for me as actor, playwright. That's the thing, and I never veered from it from that moment.
So as I was going along, and originally with David Traynor, I think I had a cast of 8. And David said, "This seems to be working." We had a reading of it, and it seemed that the audience seems to be buying the fact that Franny Sternhagen can go out and come back in as the maid, so he said, David Traynor said, "Let's cut it from 8 to 6. Can you do that?" And I said, "Well, let me try it," and we did. But I feel to some degree that other playwrights then began to be able to use that kind of device, and it's done American actors a lot of good, not because it employs fewer of them, but because American actors have this wonderful sort of versatility and bravura anyway.
For the first version, we put signs up saying that Edith Evans was going to be in the Brothers Karamazov, and we thought that people would just know it was a joke, but one teacher told people to go, "You must go see Edith Evans." And there were 3 performances or something, and Albert would get out and explain that Edith Evans had broken her hip, and so he was going to have to go on. So it was very collegiate and very silly and a lot of fun. And Howard Stein came to see it. So he thought it was great, and so he brought it to Tom Haas, who was the head of the acting department, and to our total surprise, he wanted to do it with in a big production, and it was the second-year actors, which included Meryl Streep.
I grew up in Brownsville, Brooklyn, where I was born. I was born in Brownsville. in Brooklyn.
And what language did you speak at home with the parents?
Well, we spoke Yiddish with the parents. Don't forget that was the years when immigration was still in style. People came from all over the world and they spoke their languages, like the Russians, the Germans, the Italians. They didn't learn English yet, you know. And in my house, my father and mother, though they were married in the United States, they spoke a lot of Yiddish.
There weren't that many places. You didn't go to see what was playing at La Mama. You didn't go to see a show that was at La Mama. You went to see La Mama and you see what was there. You'd see whatever was there. We're back in the 60s now. Mm-hmm. And yes, and you'd go see what was. Let's go see a Theater Genesis. What was, I remember Provincetown Playhouse. It was a great. It showed such magical home movies by Rosalind Drexler that was out of this world. You'd go down. There was a loft I went to, to see, in the 70s, but to see a play called Our Late Night by this guy, Wally Shawn, and it was shocking and sexy and great. And, and Andre Gregory, was done at the Calvary Church on Park Avenue on 22nd Street at Alice in Wonderland in the basement of the church. And it was miraculous. So you're always going around discovering and going to see people's work.
I believe in subjectivity. I believe in a lot of things that today are a little bit not looked upon with pleasure by some people. People always say, well, what is producing? What is producing? And I don't know what that is. For me, it is the intelligent application of one's own taste. And that's a notion that is no longer fashionable because it's considered narrow. But I think if one has intelligent taste, one's taste isn't narrow. It's broad, having many interests and liking many forms of plays doesn't make you, a boob. It makes you civilized, I think.
My father, for reasons not entirely clear to me and never will be, I know that he had taken classes, night classes. He was a high school graduate and worked for the telephone company for many years. He had taken night classes in acting and directing. And the reason for it was that he wanted to put on plays in the church. He was a devout Protestant, and wherever we lived, the front of the church slowly changed, and he put on plays. And clearly, this is where it all began, because I'm the youngest of 6 children, and as soon as I could toddle, I went with him to rehearsals. I would learn all the parts, if there was a part for me. As I got bigger, I once had a little snapshot of myself in some kind of probably biblical gown. They were not, it was not the church basement kind of dramas. They were either biblical or that's what interested him. And that's what he did. We would rehearse Sunday afternoon and whenever else. From the time I can remember, so it seems very clear to me that that's how it started. My father almost never went to the movies. One time, when I was under 9, because we still lived in Topeka, we went to a stock company, not close by, but some drive away. And I came to understand that he went there with my mother and another couple of friends every summer. Maybe only one. I was never involved in the children, but I was the last one, and maybe that's why. But that's the first play I remember ever seeing. It was, and I don't know what it was. I remember certain things about it, but it was fun.
Was it in a barn or a tent or a...
Not a tent, I think. I'm sorry that I don't know, but I remember going. It was a most unusual event, and that's the first play I saw.
Where did your father study the acting and directing?
Topeka, I imagine.
In a night class or a...
Yes, a night class.
And did he write the biblical plays
No.
that you did?
No.
Were you in any of the plays?
Yes, I don't remember much about it, but yes, I was.
It's eclectic because I played with a symphony orchestra, and I played with a concert orchestra. So those are influences. I grew up in the church with gospel. My father played by ear blues piano by ear. I sat on the piano stool and watched him play. Hey, baby, where did you stay last night? So that's why when he said, so he was hearing maybe the blues thing that he had heard in something. And because he wanted a bluesy sound. But it didn't mean that that's the only sound he had heard. Because when you say that, I didn't know it really had a sound. And maybe that's why my stuff is different, because people have told me, and I've had people change my work because they think that I've made a mistake. And then when I say no, and they sing it the way it's supposed to, I said, well, now it sounds like that's the only way it should go. But because they wouldn't expect, there's certain rules almost that people go by, and I might change that at it,
And I found myself being driven by my mother and my godmother to this reform school, which only because I had a Jewish woman judge in the youth court who heard me speak and said, you have an incredible vocabulary. And I was like, sometimes I read the dictionary and I love words. And she was like, well, it would be a miscarriage of justice to remand this girl to Long Lane Reformatory. Is there space at the Sisters of the Good Shepherd? So, as we say in the vernacular, she did me a solid, because, if I had gone to this reform school, Long Lane, that's like one step before Niantic State Prison. Not, I don't know, why do we survive? Who knows, right? So when I arrived, I was super stressed out. And my mother and godmother left, and I was brought into a dining room, and there were like 4 groups of girls, like 4 dormitories of girls, and one of the groups was the new girls. And I sat down and I was chattering away, and there was a nun in the front, and she kept ringing a bell saying, silence, silence, silence. I didn't know she was talking to me. So when I went to pick up my tray, each group got called to get their food, and I picked up my tray with my water and my milk and my cutlery and bread, and then you had to walk past the nun's desk, and so there's a nun sitting there, a very ancient-looking woman, with a crucifix behind her, and then 3 completely opened up packages of cigarettes in front of her. Cools, Marlboros, and Winston. And I saw the girl in front of me reach out and pick up a cigarette. And I thought, this is impossible. So I looked at the nun, and I kept my eyes on her, and I reached out and I went to pick up a cigarette, and she rang the bell and she said, deprived for speaking during silence. And they had this Pavlovian thing. So it worked on deprivations. That's how they maintained order. And of course what they did was they got all these girls addicted to smoking, and then they you might not behave under other circumstances, but if you want a cigarette, you probably will. So when she did that, I screamed, fuck you. I was like, there's a lot of really pent up, basically misdirected energy. And she rang the bell and she said, deprived for the next cigarette. And I said, I don't give a fucking goddamn fuck. And she went, ding, 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 ding. Deprived for the next week. I said, fuck you, you asshole fucking motherfucker. And she went, ding, 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 deprived for the next 2 weeks.
Then suddenly I was already in New York, living in New York, and getting everybody asking me to become an American citizen, and I wouldn't think of it because I didn't want to lose my Cuban citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
And Fidel suddenly made a speech saying that he was and always had been a Marxist-Leninist. And when he said that, I became an American citizen the following day.
Then what happened, of course, was, wait a minute, we could do that nonprofit thing in New York too. So the commercial alternative off-Broadway theater adopted the mode of nonprofit incorporation, subscriptions, and having seasons. And so my theater, Manhattan Theater Club, Circle Repertory Theater, it's the MTC I said, Circle and Square, that was again the famous Circle and Square production, and again in that period with Geraldine Page and Summer and Smoke. So this transition then happened of saying, hey, we could do that too. Not just regional theaters, we could do that in New York.
My favorite movie memory was in Grand Prairie, a sweet and innocent child raised in a Christian home. I went into the Grand Theater one day and saw Maria Montez as good and evil twins in Cobra Woman. And I ran out in between shows and bought tamales from a cart in the street and went back in. I saw every showing of Cobra Woman for the 3 or 4 days it played. And it was like that, these movies would hit out of nowhere. And many years later, in New York, I met screaming queens like me, and we could quote lines from Cobra Woman at each other, or Betty Davis movies, or Betty Grable musicals, So they were the culture, they were the common culture for a lot of us off Broadway.
I went to an audition where for a commercial, and there were like these 5 or 6 men, and mind you, I weighed like 90 pounds. It was not like I had a great body, but I guess in their minds, anything Latina was fire or sex or whatever. So I go in there, and it was for a toothpaste commercial. And they said, okay, you need to go on top of a table, the huge table, and dance. And I said, okay. And as I'm getting on the table, I said, there's something weird here that's going on. And they sat there to look. I said, oh, how do I get out? I said, I need to go to the restroom. All right, make it quick. And I went, and I just disappeared. The other one was a little bit more dangerous because this was across from the United Nations. This producer had this apartment on the 9th floor, and I was sent by an agent actually to that. And it was for a film to play, it was a nurse of some kind. And so I went there, and he was alone, and I was alone. And then halfway through the audition, he said, now just lift your skirt. And I said, well, what is the size of the uniform I'm going to wear as a nurse? He says, it's going to be short skirt, okay. And I, put it up a little bit. Said, more. He went like that. And I just froze, and he said, I'll be back. And he went to the bathroom. I said, that's a bad sign. And I just looked at the door, and something got into me as how exactly it is that I locked the door when I came in. Because I went like that. I said, a minute, so let's make it quick. 9th floor, I'll never forget it. So I just opened the door and ran 9 floors out to the exit, to the stairs. Ran out of there for my life. And I called backstage because I had seen it there, and then I called my semi-agent, and she made a complaint, and then I called. By then we had organizations to protect us, and all our people, the Hispanic organizations for Latin actors, and they said give us the name immediately, we're going to file a report. And that's when things began to turn. In general in the city where that wouldn't happen now, or if it happens, it would be dire consequences. But then it was like, the usual thing.
The first things I saw of the open theater were a series of lecture demonstrations at the New School. A friend who was interested in dance brought me there. I saw it, and I just thought, this is theater, this is fantastic. No, they were doing trust exercises, lots of things that now are pretty commonplace, sound and movement things. Never seen any of that stuff before. And they spoke about the way in which they worked together and they improvised, and I thought it was wonderful. And And I went up after and said that I thought so. And then Joe invited me to come and just sit in on sessions. Joe would always have to say yes. If Joe didn't like it, it was out. And I actually loved that because he would say no. And, sometimes he'd give you a reason, but often there was no reason. But there would be a little guidance, like something like, no, that's too soft. Or that's, we need something that ties it into, what's going on in Algeria. I don't know, whatever it was. And, and then it would be, well, great, here's a new challenge. Now let's see if I could do that. And I always found that a lot of fun and interesting to do. It was a wonderful way to work, and it was the way we worked throughout from the very beginning. It would be, everything would go through Joe. And, occasionally there were people who were hurt, or there were people whose ideas were maybe twisted into a shape that they hadn't intended, or you were always, since there was nothing, everybody was auditioning all the time for this moment. Is this going to be in or out? Are these words going to be in or out? Is this character? So it was constantly that, but it gave an incredible intensity to the whole experience, which some of us, I guess, took to more than others.
We got to the moment when, Dinah had pulled out, or whatever her name is, had pulled out all of the plugs, and her husband had said, "I'm so sorry, that won't happen again." And she's made the crepe Suzette, and the husband comes in with this sauce, and it's flaming, and he pours the sauce on the flame that is already flaming, and it ignites, and a huge flame shoots up in the air. Diane Weiss's hair goes up in flames. She's in flames. The spout of the bottle goes into Bob Geringer's head, blood rushing down his head, blood rushing down Jane Hoffman's head. As Diane is going up in flames, Kathy Bates grabs an overcoat, throws herself on top of Diane, and the audience is sitting there going, "Wow, Tina Howe again, boy." And then the cry goes up, "Is there a doctor in the house?" And suddenly the audience freezes, and the curtain shuts, and I run up to the stage, and the actors are immediately taken off stage, and they go down to the green room, and I go down to the green room, and I'm thinking, once again, me and my imagination, look what I'm doing. I burned up my actors. I did that. I burned them up. And I didn't know the story. I didn't know what had happened, but I just felt this tremendous guilt that I had created this fire. So I went down and was just sobbing, and Peter Parnell was there and held me in his shaking arms because he was opening a show, and Joe Papp was there in his white three-piece white suit. And immediately, within 5 minutes, the bomb squad was there because there'd been an explosion. The fire department was there. Ambulances were there, and film crews were there because of this conflagration. All of these people had come thundering onto the stage, as this was going on. And so I was down with Diane, who was third-degree burns, and God bless Kathy Bates for throwing herself on top of her.
And I loved this. They had this little tiny office, the Shannon Brothers, with an upright piano. I would squeeze in there with them, and they would sing their newest song, and they would sometimes ask me to sing it along with them so they could hear it in English, And I loved all that. And eventually they said, "Would you consider being the voice of Prue?" I said, I couldn't do that, I don't think. They said, "Well, we would love you." And we were thinking, and we've actually asked Walter if he would agree, if you would come with us at lunchtime tomorrow, and we'll do a couple of the songs with you singing to him. I said, I couldn't do that.
a career in the arts, I think, is a continual journey of self-definition, and who am I, and in some cases, how do I sell that? And so that really was a real strong encouragement to me that yes, if there is a place for me as actor, playwright, that's the thing, and I never veered from it from that moment.